Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me here at the Cybersecurity Forum. So I've put up something on the board, and I just want to have a show of hands how many people can actually read that paragraph. Wow, it looks like just about the whole crowd. Okay, that's interesting, because I think it ties in nicely with the discussion we had yesterday with Anton, those that were there. It just goes to show what the human brain does and how it works. Doesn't need to read the whole sentence, doesn't need to read just the first and the last characters, and you can make out what the words are. So, interesting bit of fact. It's just a starter, an icebreaker. And we'll get on to the main topic, which is cybersecurity. So, disclaimer as usual. Everyone gets the disclaimer as normal. And I apologize for the size of some of the fonts, just to get some of the data on. It's been a bit challenging. Having said that, at JP Morgan, we've been committed to fighting cybercrime for quite some time. In 2012, we were allocated a budget by our executives, and this is from the top of the house. So Jamie Dimon, our CEO, Matt Zames, who's our COO, have committed $250 million at the time just on cybersecurity. The pace that cybercrime has increased, to date, we're now at $600 million just on cybersecurity. Now, the size and scale of our operation, we can afford to have that type of operation in order to ensure that our clients are protected. And that's the main intention, is to ensure that our clients' funds, our clients' data is protected against any form of criminal threat. Where is this money being spent? So some of it is being spent around infrastructure, the perimeter, anything around firewalls, data at rest, encryption on that, data in transit, encryption on those, and then the security centers. So we've got 3 security centers where we've invested in globally. And these centers, over the last 18 months, have built out significant capabilities to be able to stop attacks on our systems prior to even reaching any one of the deeper layers within our organization. Our CEO, Jamie Dimon, commented in terms of the commitment on training that we've put forward, and we offer various channels in terms of the training that's available, web online, live web sessions, webinar sessions, together with in-person sessions, similar to these that we actually go out to clients and give them an overview on. So from that perspective, the stats that we've reviewed, and this is industry stats that we're looking at, a lot of it is related to the type of crime that's happening out there. There's been a year-on-year increase of over 90%. That means last year, 2015, up to date, 2016, globally, there's been 90% increase in terms of the threats that have come across. Now, if we look at this phenomenon, less than 5 years ago, it was very small. The typical threat that existed, social engineering. If you look at social engineering, someone making a call, someone looking for data, and unfortunately, they may get some of the data, and at times it would be valuable, at times it wouldn't be valuable, but they look to create a project plan. And this is some of the things we've seen in criminal syndicates, where they create project plans to defraud clients. Now, I don't know anyone here creates project plans for their day-to-day work, but this is what criminals are doing. Some of the other things that we've seen, this is not targeted at a specific organization. Yes, they do their reconnaissance work and they do target certain organizations, but you're not immune to it. In terms of organizations, you've heard of some of the large banks across the globe, central banks that's been attacked recently. You've heard of small organizations that's been attacked. We've had quite a few of those coming across the years, and a lot of them lose data. Having said that, subsequently you find out, be it days, weeks, months, even years later, that there's been a loss of there's been a financial loss. So from that perspective, it's now focusing on what's the value of the data, how do you protect the data, and how do you ensure that it's not just you dealing with it within your organization, it's about your vendors, it's about your partners out there. How do they deal with similar threats? Because at the moment, the challenge is the challenge that we face is specifically around the data that gets out, how it's being manipulated, how it's being used, and at the same time, one of the talks from the Governor of England, the Chief Security Information Officer of the Bank of England quoted recently that executives need to step away from the mindset that cyber is can have a technology fix, or not solely a technology fix, but a majority of the fix that they anticipate should come from technology. At the moment, the biggest threat is the human, and we see this time and time again. There's quite a few examples of the types of threats that we see, and I'll talk through some of those on the coming slides. The first one is email, and people may think, email? I don't make payments via email. I don't do anything via email. How can email be a threat? Well, we've seen where within organizations, a client receives an email from a vendor, an existing vendor, instructing them to change beneficiary details. They may have changed a banker, they may have changed their address, etc., and the email comes through. People either validate it, they pick up the phone, look at the invoice, yes, it's a valid number, let's make the call. They make the call, and they validate it, and they proceed to make the payment. Typically, your vendor gives you about a 3-month credit line, and 3 months later, your vendor's phoning you, asking you where the funds are. Unfortunately, from that perspective, the validation that they done was on the back of the phone number that was on the email or on that invoice, and that typically goes back to the fraudster. That's one of the examples. There's a number of others in terms of CEO or business email compromise, and it's not CEO fraud. We hope none of our CEOs are defrauding our organizations, but from that perspective, it's where when email is received into an organization from someone pretending to be a CEO of that organization, instructing that individual to make a payment, to instruct a payment that's urgent, has to be done, has to be kept confidential, and virtually has to be done immediately. Now, if we look at some of the red flags associated with those emails, you will see the email address, slight changes in the email address, 1 character apart. And back to the starting of the presentation, where you could read that paragraphs, that's exactly the mentality that the fraudsters use. They utilize that information to trick the brain to think, you know, instead of an M, they'll put a double N. To the naked eye, it looks like an M. An I and an L switched around. Again, the brain is not picking it up because we're busy during the course of our day, and we proceed. So from that perspective, the industry has seen a significant increase in terms of volume related to this types of fraud. What we do recommend is individuals that receive emails, look at the details. So typically, as I said, the email address is one portion of it. The other thing is the familiarity of the greeting. So typically, the email would say, "Hi, Jane. It's Joe. Are you in the office? Can you please make this payment? I'm traveling." So yes, we do have executives that travel, but if someone's traveling and instructing you to make a payment to a beneficiary that you've never paid before, it should be a red flag. The urgency behind that. So typically the message is, can you make this payment, and can you make it immediately, together with confidentiality. So keep it quiet. It's an acquisition. Nobody else in the organization knows. Now typically, if nobody else knows, it would be questionable. What is the CEO doing on his own? But at the same time, if you look at some of the other elements of that email, it starts to paint a trend that the details that you look at doesn't necessarily match up with your previous pattern of payments either. So typically a high value payment, amounts you've never paid, maybe even a location you've never paid before. Don't get fooled by thinking that the Far East is more riskier than somewhere in the West. It's all alike. Some of the data that we've seen suggests that Europe and elsewhere in the US have a significant amount of challenges, much like the Far East and Africa. So from that perspective, that's what we see. And as I said, that's the majority of the types of frauds that we're seeing coming through. The second one is malware. So malware, maliciousware, or layman's terms, it's a virus, can get onto your computer via various methods. Could be a simple email from, you think it's a friend, says, have a look at my holiday pictures. You click on the link and nothing happens. Click on the link the second time, nothing happens. You think nothing of it, you delete the email. What has happened is that link has gone to a website and downloaded malware onto your PC. That malware has the ability to monitor your traffic, look at emails, look at the payments you're making, look at what banks you're banking with, etc. And utilizing that information, the fraudsters then transfer that information to a command and control server and utilize that information then to defraud clients. Now, typically, malware is associated with, as I said, a virus. The information that you gather from there is vital in terms of how you protect yourself. So, do you have malware detection? Do you have virus detection, etc.? All that plays a part in it. Having said that, these fraudsters are quite intelligent. They look at the opportunities. They look at what antivirus you're running. And unfortunately, some of this malware has the ability to morph itself to make the operating system think that it's actually part of the system. It's not a virus. So, as I mentioned, clicking on a link definitely cause for concern. If you get an email, says click here, look at the detail. Who is it from? Is it someone you know? It may even look like it's someone you know. And when you look at the email address, if you hover over it, you might find that the reply address goes to someone else. That's email masking. And similar to the previous one where we saw in the email where the characters were changed, you have email masking as well, where you look at the address and it says johnsmith@abccorporation.com. And you think it's John. The moment you click on the reply button, it goes to a public domain email address. And it's, unfortunately, it's available as you can associate an alias with an email, and that's the vulnerability that they're using at the moment in terms of abusing in terms of getting it out there. Malware can come in the form of a PDF. It can come in the form of an Excel file, which has macros running. So think about it before you go onto those sites as well. You may be looking for holidays. Don't do it from work. Utilize your PC at home, and hopefully you've got antivirus on there as well. But I'm sure people have seen some of the sites that you go onto. You do some searches on a holiday, etc. And 3-4 weeks later, you're doing some other searches, and all of a sudden there's a nice little picture, holiday in Spain. Oh, how do they know I wanted to go to Spain last week? And that's exactly what it does. It utilizes the information on your PC to paint a picture together. Now, it's all marketing data, but unfortunately, the fraudsters are utilizing this to defraud clients and obviously abusing the data that they gather from there. With malware, they also have the ability to redirect your computer to a fraudulent website. So you think you may be going to your banking website. The next time you log in, the system redirects you to a site that looks identical to your banking website. You attempt to log in, and it gives you a failed login, or it doesn't allow you. And typically, you can get a call from someone claiming to be from the help desk. Oh, you're having a problem with your PC. Can we help you? And typically what would happen is the person will say, can you get the person next to you to come and log in? And when you've got your 4i process or your make a checker process, 2 user IDs are already compromised. That means the fraudsters can abuse that. And they don't even need to be doing activity on your computer. They can actually do this through SQL injection and all sorts of other fancy technologies in order to execute payments and obviously defraud clients. Social engineering. I mentioned social engineering up front. On its own, it's probably not as effective as the others, but put social engineering alongside email and malware, and it becomes a real big threat. So typically, the social engineering, you may receive calls saying, so if you've got malware on your computer, and the fraudsters know exactly what you're up to, and all of a sudden you're doing some work with your financial institutions, the fraudster knows this, they would look to abuse it. They would take that information, and on your next attempt, or before your next attempt, you would receive a call. say, I'm calling you from your financial institution. Can you please share with us 2 user IDs? We want to test a payment process with you. It's just a $1 payment, and that's it. And you think, well, it's in implementation phase. Let's go ahead and share the details. You go and share the details, only to find out that they've literally drained accounts. And these are the concerns. The information together, as I mentioned, the social engineering component, together with malware, together with the email component, is a huge risk. Typically, these fraudsters that do make these calls, and I'm not sure in South Africa if it's that large, but I know in the UK, on a daily basis, I at least get 5 calls a day on my home phone claiming that my Microsoft PC has been infected by a virus. Guess what? I don't have a Microsoft PC at home. And if you start talking to them and dragging them on, typically what they try to do is they get you to try and load a bit of software that allows them to take control of your PC, and then they leave it at that, and you think it's all done, and all they do is they're siphoning the data off there. And that's exactly what they do. Sometimes they pose as I mentioned, help desk staff. They've got valid credentials, so they typically get information from organizations. So within your organization, if your responsibility, your team's responsibility, is not to provide information out to people, don't give out people's names, don't give out people's email addresses. Physical addresses, you give the normal company's physical address. Think about the personally identifiable information, that PII. It's vitally important because as part of the process, when a fraudster gets that information, they have the ability to then clone that specific user, and identity theft obviously occurs from there. So those are the things you've got to think about end to end. Some of the other vulnerabilities we've heard, where you think it's a vendor coming into your environment, and everybody's focused on a vendor dealing with the computer systems, etc., and they're concerned about that. It could well be a vendor fixing a normal door. Comes in and plugs a little device inside your network, you wouldn't even know. So you've got to be conscious about the environment, not just specifically focus on certain things, but again, it is something to keep in mind. So I apologize for those at the back, probably can't see this slide, but these are some of the best practices that we've recommended. Education. Education is number 1. From our perspective, we've taken a proactive stance on education to ensure that what we're doing for our clients, they can pay forward in terms of that to their clients and their vendors, because that's the only way we're going to fight this. As I mentioned earlier, it's the human element that's at risk at this stage. You can put in as much technology. Technology has got its space, don't get me wrong. However, the human element is the biggest risk, as I mentioned earlier. Business email compromise. Authenticate that source. Look where that email is coming from. Do a reply. See if the reply actually goes back to the person that sent you the original email. Now, I don't know how many people actually look at the reply address when they click on the reply button, but I know up to a couple of months ago, I never used to. And it's normal human nature. You assume that the system is doing exactly what it's intended to do. I'm clicking on the reply, it's going back to the person it's intended for, or that sent it to me. So think about those. Data privacy, as I mentioned, be it data at rest or data in transit, encrypting that data. Even simple emails, when you're sending emails, and Chris was assisting me with a presentation earlier, and just to get it from within our organization out to here proved rather challenging. And this is, it's some of the controls that we've got in place, but it's good controls. It's there to ensure that if someone does something accidentally, at least there's a control in place that they can stop it. But also, those people that are there, hopefully not. But if you have any insiders, you've got a control mechanism to be able to siphon those out as well. Payment controls. So a lot of the online systems have got various payment controls. Unfortunately, people are not utilizing those payment controls. They're assuming that, well, I can log in, I can make my payment, and I'm good to go, and I don't need to put limits on my accounts. I don't need to worry about, an overdraft, etc., similar to our own personal bank accounts. If your organization can afford to lose 10, 15 million, maybe then it's affordable. If you can't, then you should be looking at some of your processes and ensuring that the controls that you've got in your environment is adequate for your business. The connectivity model, as I mentioned, making sure that you've got a detection system to be able to identify when there's viruses, when there's malware in your environment. Social engineering, social media. I think lots of people have been tweeting, putting things on Facebook, taking photos, etc. It's great. It's nice to share media. When I'm back in the UK, I can connect with my family on this side. Having said that, the risk associated with that is tremendous. Think about the data. If you're standing in your office space and you're taking a photo, it may be of something, pardon me, maybe of someone just standing, making a funny pose or whatever it might be. You take a photo, in the background, someone's standing there and logged in on a banking website. And in essence, you can scroll, you can zoom into the data and be able to see what's happening on there. And you put this picture out on Facebook. It's a lot of small things which people don't think about. There was an article a few months in the newspaper where this lady had a bank account emptied, and it's a personal individual out in the UK. People wondering, oh, how did she said, I can't understand how my password was, I've got a secure password, etc. And they said, okay, well, what's the details? And they looked at it and they found out, she said, no, it's my pet's name. Oh, great. And they found a Facebook photo with her pet with a little dog tag, which had the pet's name on it. So it's things like that, which you don't think about. Nobody knows the name, but all of a sudden it's there. Somewhere along the line, it's associated. You think about, your normal passwords. How many people's passwords are associated with their spouse's names, spouse or kids' dates of birth, a combination of that. It takes fraudsters 5 minutes to get that level of detail. The moment they got a bit of data, they can manipulate it and use it as they see fit. Escalation. It's vitally important that in the current time, 24 hours is even way too long. If you become aware of a fraud, the idea is to try and get it out there as soon as possible, get the information out with your banks to be able to do that recall, because once the money hits that account, 9 out of 10 times that money is already gone. There's been evidence that money's moved in 4 hours. Now, you've got faster payments, you've got all the nice technology to move money around the world. Unfortunately, the fraudsters have just the same technology to be able to move it out of those accounts as well. And then lastly, the denial of service. Obviously, making sure that you protect your environment against the threats that are out there on your side. So what are we hearing from our clients? So these are global clients. This is, we've surveyed the market. There's a number of other institutions that are doing much the same. We mentioned, number one, education. And it's good to hear now clients are asking, well, should I be educating my staff? Should I be educating my vendors? Should I be educating my clients? And absolutely yes, because it's like the blockchain technology, right? You create that link and hopefully get to a point where you've created a big enough network to be able to then fight the fraudsters at their own game. The other one is that I want to cover is leveraging the training. So a lot of institutions offer training. Across the globe, you can do online training for free. You look at a lot of these non-profit organizations are offering training for free. It takes you half an hour, but it teaches you some valuable lessons. It's not about technology. It's not about how do I address certain things. It's general awareness, and that's what you need. You need to make your organizations aware. You need to make sure people are thinking about it internally, talking about it. Other organizations are actually publishing large articles, posters, putting it up on their walls, because that's the threat that exists out there at the moment. Payment controls we spoke about. Some of the other things is the cyber versus fraud element, and people think, well, I don't need to have a breach in my I need to have a breach in my organization in order for a fraud to happen. Unfortunately, you don't have to have that breach, because the moment the fraudster has the ability to trick a user into making a payment, that's all they need to do, is have that one chance to trick a user and the money is moved. And typically, if you don't do reconciliation on a daily basis, it takes you far longer to pick up that fraud, and by the time you get to it, guess what? It's most likely gone. So there's one little video I'd like to share, and Chris will put it up for us as we step through the last bits of the presentation. So this is Jimmy Kimmel. He's a talk show host in the US. I'm not sure if anyone's seen this, but it's called What's Your Password?
We've been hearing a lot about cybersecurity lately, largely because of what happened to Sony. Companies and individuals are more concerned about the safety and privacy of their information than ever. President Obama has unveiled a number of new proposals this week to crack down on hackers, and he plans to address this in the State of the Union speech on Tuesday. And it's great that the government is working on this, but the truth of the matter is we need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123. And as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on the Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's his name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where did you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. And you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password, there would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June.
How old are you?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6, 12, 95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 4, 6, 8, and then Israel. It's only 3, but it's for me it's strong enough.
1, 2, 3, 4. Gemma. 1, 2, 3. Spell G-E-M-M.
Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so like
what's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name.
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Well, the important thing is
So that's how easy is it. You know, to fish information, you don't need to ask, you can ask almost, it seems like irrelevant questions. However, when you start digging down deeper and you associate those questions with your password, you start to realize there's similarities. And that's exactly what the fraudsters are doing. They know what questions to ask. You might get a survey to complete online and you think you're just putting in information. How many people put in information about resetting passwords as your mother's maiden name or your pet's name or whatever else it might be? And this information is available on the internet. I mean, the internet is vast. And the amount of information that's there is amazing. I've just recently applied for the UK citizenship, and I was looking for information for my great-grandparents in the 1920s. Where did I find it? On the internet. I would have never thought of it, but it's there. And it's things like that. It's great for sharing information, however, it's just as risky. So with that thought, hopefully you've taken away one bit of information about passwords, and try and go and change your password as you leave here. But thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Any questions? Yeah?
Hi, Jackie from ACI Worldwide. I enjoyed that a lot.
Thank you.
I have a personal belief that there is a social responsibility for, I don't know whether it's at a government level or where, to teach the so-called millennials of this world who are already tech savvy. So we don't need to teach them to be tech savvy, but we need them to teach them to be social savvy with their information and how they utilize that, how they utilize social media and what they share on social media. To me, there's not enough of that. I know that in the UK, Barclays Bank are doing these series of TV adverts which try and do some of that. But where, in your opinion, do you think the responsibility lies? Is it with the government and therefore through the schooling, starting at age 3 and 4 and 5, or with the people that actually benefit from the advances in technology, like the banks or maybe the merchants?
So yeah, absolutely. They need to be streetwise. I think, when I grew up, which was a while ago, I had to be streetwise in order to make sure that I could sort of stand on my 2 feet out there. Similarly, yes, you're right. There needs to be that level of education, and the responsibility starts, I believe, at a government level, at a regulator level, where you start to mandate certain controls, certain education policies in place. And it's great because a lot of the schools across the globe are now teaching technology. It needs to be incorporated as part of that curriculum. It's vitally important that as quick as we can develop all the fancy technology, and yesterday we heard about blockchain. Unfortunately, there's pitfalls with technology. We know that. We are human, we develop the software, and there are going to be pitfalls. And we see it coming through time and time again. But it's making sure that people are thinking about when they develop software, when they're working with tools, is start to think about the cyber element or the threat of the cyber exposure across the life cycle of a project. Not at the beginning, not at the end, but throughout the life cycle. So as you're developing code, you're thinking about how can it be vulnerable, what data can be exposed, etc. But back to the point, it's a community function. It needs to start within. And hopefully our regulators will get to a point where they will start mandating it. We're starting to see the US putting together some regulation, we've heard. The UK starting to do similar things. It's about getting that enforced, but at the same time making sure that financial institutions like you and I needs to act on some of these, and making sure that when we see fraudulent funds, are we allowed to block the funds immediately rather than wait for a request to come in from elsewhere. Just in order to contain it. As I said, these fraudsters these are syndicates. They're not sort of 1 or 2 hackers that sits outside trying to prove a point. This is a business they run. And the moment you pull out the funding within a business, it collapses. And that's what we've got to try and do. Yeah.
Any other questions?
No? Have I shocked everyone?
Well,
okay.
Kamiesh, on behalf of PASA, thank you very much and much appreciated.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.